Glad to know you're still with us. Now let's delve into other issues. Another protest erupted in Ogun State over the naira scarcity, with videos online showing two banks set on fire in the Sagamu area of the state, reportedly Keystone and Union banks, with some youths holding planks. And in protest, the Ogun State Police Command has arrested 27 suspects in connection with the pandemonium. On Friday last week, protests erupted in the Mowe-Ibafo area of Ogun State, K2 Mile 12, Ikorodu, amongst other places in Lagos. And of course, joining us to further discuss this is the legal luminary himself, Barrister Jide Ologun. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you too.
Beautiful color combination.
Thank you.
It's glowing. But it's good to have you on the show. So let's look at all of these issues. Apparently, right now, the country is in chaos in different parts of the country with the burning of banks and destruction of bank properties. But where do you see all of this going?
You know, eventually, things will stabilize. When you talk about change management, we have three critical phases. You talk about the shock. You know, when you introduce the change, and the shock can engender anger, which is what we are witnessing across the nation now. Then after that, you move to acceptance, and beyond acceptance, you have commitment. And also it depends on how you manage that change campaign, because as Nigeria is in chaos now, Australia is not in chaos, and Australia is metamorphosing the currency after the demise of the Queen of England. Even in the UK also, they are transforming the look of the currency.
But they are not doing it the way we're doing it.
Exactly. So change is constant, but how you implement change will determine what happens. And then again, we have four critical elements to consider in change. You talk of the input, you talk of the output, you talk of the product and the impact. So, and you need to evaluate the ecosystem of the change campaign even before you proceed. Because like they say in project management, if a project fails, it fails ab initio, at the point of conception, not just midway.
Even before you
Exactly, because you are expected to be proactive and try to envisage what the response will be. And of course, in the case of Australia, the government came to the point that you cannot just drive a change overnight. And that's why those currencies will run concurrently. In fact, in the case
Even
of the
in
UK, it will not fully be effected until the middle of 2024. So these are issues. But here in Nigeria, I think we are used to the fire brigade approach, and now we are seeing the impact.
You said something very instructive, the fact that before you take your project to the field or before you implement your project, you must have foreseen the possible bottlenecks, the challenges, and all of the issues it may spring up. Is it possible that this policy by the federal government, by the CBN, is it possible that they probably did foresee all of these challenges, all of these bottlenecks before implementing it?
You know, I read an account by a deputy governor of Central Bank, and she admitted that they never envisaged the reactions from the people.
But we saw the reaction from, for instance, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, who said that this would bring a lot of issues and challenges. How come they didn't even take some minutes, some moments to look into the statement she made?
In public relations, there's what you call stakeholders engagement. The Minister of Finance is a major stakeholder in what we just did in the country. But at the point, she even said she was not in the picture.
Aware.
You see, so, and that's what I mean by the evaluation of the ecosystem. The governors should have been consulted, the major stakeholders, but it appears that one of the reasons given for the implementation of that policy was not going to allow extensive stakeholder consultation, which is to prevent vote buying, and which has come out now to appear to be the major reason, because the the excuse given on ransom taking. Some bandits have come out to say, we have this money. In fact, I heard of somebody kidnapped recently, and the kidnappers requested for new notes. And they got 5 million. So these are desperate things. And if you are talking of corruption, we've read account of the counterfeited
even
currency.
4 days after it was
4
released
days
in December
after.
15.
You know, we've read about people hoarding it. And if it's about vote buying, it may appear to have delivered some dividends, but it has not in any way stopped the politicians from campaigning.
Has it delivered dividends? Because if you look at the fact that people are now more impoverished, and it is now
they are even now prone to
buy
selling their votes, whether in cash or kind. Because right now, anyone you give 1,000 naira is
especially with the new naira note.
Whether it's even if it's the 200 that the president came out to endorse, because people are suffering. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And that is the impact aspect. And that is what you call impact assessment. Was that done? Okay, the banks that have been burnt down, you know, the facilities destroyed, people killed, how do you restore that? Who takes responsibility? And the trust in the banking system that has been tampered with, how do you restore it? Because I can let you know, as a public relations practitioner, you know, the 1978 Mexican statement about public relations says is the art and social sciences of monitoring trends and predicting their consequences, and recommending programs you can implement to establish mutual understanding and benefits. I can let you know that after we come out of this, the banks will struggle to attract deposit from customers.
That will further reduce
at least for a season.
Inclusion.
Exactly, because people will go and collect their money, and I believe that some alternative platforms will come up, because with the kind of economy we run, where about 30 million are reported not to be banked, it's hugely physical cash based when you talk about our transactions. And suddenly you find people now who don't have cash to transport themselves to their places of work, who don't have transport fare to even move food from where they are produced. A lot of hardship. Some families can no longer feed, because you are talking of the people, generality of the people. Majority are in the wage bracket, what you earn daily. So who is even coming to repair car? You see, how many Nigerians have access to POS? Even the network to operate this POS has been quite erratic. So in fact, the painful aspect is that those who can afford it now buy naira with additional naira. So it's a serious crisis. And still dwelling on public relations, we have two approaches to crisis management. You have the proactive approach, which is preventive, and you have the reactive approach, which is curative. And like the elders say, it's cheaper to prevent than to cure. It's costlier when you are curing. So right now we have crisis in our hands, and let's see how far this will go. And it's also touching on the fabric of our governance synergy. You can see the president now pitched against the Supreme Court, the CBN on one side, the governors, governor of central bank, governors of states, you know, traditional leaders. So different kinds of stakeholders that make it appear as if things have fallen apart and the center is struggling to hold.
So my question to you now is, you said in your earlier comment that projects do not fail midway. They fail at the ab initio, especially at the beginning stage, when evaluation of projects are not made before the implementation. Could it be said that the reason for not involving the Ministry of Finance was for some very ulterior motive, especially when you said to prevent vote buying and all that?
The CBN should be firstly accountable to the Federal Minister of Finance
But it
before the
said that
president.
there is a representative from the Ministry of Finance, even on the board of the CBN, and so that should be enough to inform them.
Nigeria is an interesting country in several ways. Even during the budget presentation at the National Assembly, you hear the Minister of Finance saying that something was smuggled into the budget that she was not aware of. So you see all these things here and there. So there hasn't been synergy. Even though we have three arms of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, they are expected to work together while striking the checks and balances, responsibilities, to work together. Because if you look at Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, it says that the National Assembly shall make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the nation. And when these laws are made, the executive implements. And when you need the interpretation of the laws, adjudication, you go to the judiciary. Well, here we are now. Parties have approached the judiciary. Judiciary gave an interim order. Executive came to dislodge the interim order. So you find it's a very dicey situation. And going forward, for whatever reason, we should not be seen to be in this picture. I recall at the time, and the question you asked, you know, I don't envy leaders. You have a lot of people around you who have their different motives. They come advising you. So it's now for you to sit back and evaluate. And I will put my hands on evaluation. In consultancy, you make recommendations. You submit your recommendations. You get paid, you move. The organization sits down to see what we've implemented. So when you are advised, you look at what you do. At a time, we woke up to land borders being shut in Nigeria because we needed to strengthen the local production capacity of farmers to prevent proliferation of ammunition and some other reasons. But at the end of the day, the same government came out to admit that, you know, little was achieved. And in the boardroom, you talk about returns on investment. So can you consider that to be a wise investment for the nation? Many businesses were crippled at that point in time. In fact, more ammunition came to the country because some were bringing ammunition on camels back. We saw these videos. In fact, a part of the borders in Nigeria remained open. In fact, the president came out at a time, maybe out of frustration,
don't even have borders
to say that only God can man the border between Niger Republic and Nigeria. So how do you put the government in such an embarrassing state?
Well, let me come to the statement or the declaration broadcasts made by President Muhammadu Buhari on February 16th. That was last week. He said categorically that the 200 naira notes would be recirculated by the CBN. Why is it that up till now we still do not have access to that old 200 naira note? Because the essence is to ease the burden. If the essence is to ease the burden, how come Nigerians do not have access to the 200 naira note?
Some Nigerians have access.
Some.
You know,
Why should
yes,
it be some?
when I got back to the office yesterday, my wife approached me and I think she could get 10,000 naira of the old 200 naira note.
That must be a
and gave
sum.
me 5,000 at least to hold cash. And she came back to collect 2,000 from the
Well, she has to keep the whole, you know.
But they are not flowing. You see, what you would have expected is that if you mop up about 2.7 trillion from the society, it's either you print enough and mint enough of the new currency to throw back to the society, even if you decide to control now that, okay, and if to make it more difficult, the CBN clamped down on the amount you can withdraw from your accounts. You see, and when some customers go to the bank, the ATMs were not dispensing. There were issues, and that is what led to the anger. So some are assessing it, but it's not just flowing as it should flow.
Why isn't it flowing as it should flow?
Bureaucracy, logistics, project management, evaluation of procedures. And in business and governance, there's what we call best interest procedure. So if you have put the economic interests of the nation on the table, the welfare of the citizens on the table, would have ensured that all channels are open to prevent the chaos that we have now. But it's now appearing more like a sting action. You know, that let's go and shock the society. And, you know, with the elders, we respect them. They say an angry man is a hungry man. Is an angry man.
But do you see this affecting the polls? We know we've always had voter apathy in the country, and some people have been raising concerns that with all of this happening, people are really in a state of despair. And many people would be thinking, really, why am I in this situation? For some, it might push them to go do some referendum vote. But for some others, it might be, really, I don't really care what happens anymore. I'm just concerned about my life. How do I get to feed my children? How do I get to send them to school and all of that? Where do you see it tilting the polls?
I've met both schools of thoughts. You know, some have told me they are not voting, that they are not interested. You know, that anything they like, let them do. And some are saying, whatever it takes, they will vote. And again, that was a brilliant question you asked. Because sometimes when you are deploying your tactics, because before you talk of tactics, you must consider strategy. And strategy is a long-term plan for success. Tactics are the things you do to implement your strategy. It may backfire because a candidate came out to say, oh, they are after me. That may engender sympathy from some quarters. We've seen, exactly. We've seen the things going on in this country. Maybe for the first time, I'm approaching 60 now, so I've monitored. Maybe for the first time, we are seeing rumbling within the same party, even if it's denied. So it's not opposition now saying. So some have the perception, and we don't joke with perception in public relations, that hey, you are one of us, so you want to wreck this ship. We are not going to allow it. And that is why some of the governors are rising up to go and meet the, because if you are monitoring, at the time the president was not even signaling any interest in the candidate of his party, until the governors went to him. And he now came out, joined them for further campaign, then gave another broadcast